The Dragon Age Veilguard finally came out, and unless you've been living under a rock, you know that it is swarmed in controversy, whether that be because of the gameplay or because of the choices that we'll talk about. So I finally got my hands on Dragon Age Veilguard. I put a lot of time into it already, and I want to give my honest impressions about what I think works and what I think doesn't work. So if you're a fan of all things RPGs, BioWare, Mass Effect, Bethesda games, if any of that kind of stuff sounds good to you, consider leaving a like at the least and a sub at the most. Thank you so much. Let's go. Throughout this video, I'm just going to be talking about all of the standout things, whether they be very good, very bad, middling, or what have you. So let's start off with the backgrounds. So after the character creation, you are given the option to choose a faction. Essentially what this is a return to form with the backgrounds from Mass Effect. So essentially I chose a background from many different choices, and just like Shepard being a war hero, saving all those people despite all the odds and whatnot, referenced throughout the game, and people refer to you as that person that did blank with the blank faction and whatnot. And I was really surprised about this because I figured that it would just be a one-off thing, but it is referenced many times and it really solidifies you as the character that you are trying to roleplay as, and it's really well done. There was even a moment in the game early on where you were setting down your personal effects around your room, and as you do so, your character will actually comment on past events and how it has affected them, reminiscing on the memories that made them who they are, you know, right as of this moment. And I actually got really emotional about my own character. So the example is, I created a character kind of like a Witcher. He's very scarred up all over his body. And now, even though this was my choice, the game gives you the options to choose how to reflect on yourself. So my character sets down a mirror and reminisces about a friend telling them about the hardships that they have been through and how they can be a hero, you know, be a good person, but it will cost them. Then my character comments on himself and the choices that he has already made, even reflecting on his many scars, which are scars that I actually gave him. So just take a look at this.
Funny. Varric didn't mention that hero having so many scars. It's handy. You ever get too full of yourself, you can just look in the mirror and see every mistake that left a mark. But it's not just about you anymore. Nev's got a new scar because you sent her into that ritual. So do better. Nobody else should have to wear your mistakes. Hero.
This is the type of writing that I think can really carry a great RPG, and it's not often that we have dialogue that is really, you know, self-reflective instead of focusing on someone else and their relationship with you as the character. The music in the game is something that I was so worried about, and it is really incredible. To be fair, I think all of the music in the Dragon Age games have always been amazing, and I guess I was holding my expectations low just in case they might have missed that mark here, but this is some of the best fantasy music that I've heard in such a long time. And I just wanted to touch on it because the atmosphere married with the visuals and the music is just really well done. The art style. So I think it's obvious to say that whenever we play sequels to our favorite games, we definitely expect, you know, a certain type of art style and aesthetic, which rings true to what it is and how recognizable and iconic that it can be. And when it comes to Dragon Age, however, it's an art style that has changed drastically with each sequel from Dragon Age Origins, 2, and Inquisition. And it has been trending upward or downward depending on your perspective in a more artistic and one might say sometimes cartoonish style. Now, I made a video talking about how Dragon Age 2 was sort of like the beginning of a lot of the changes that we see coming to full fruition in Dragon Age Inquisition and now in Veilguard. The art style in Dragon Age Veilguard is not something that I prefer, especially for a Dragon Age game. You know, a lot of people have compared it to Fortnite, and while I can kind of see that, it looks much less cartoonish. I think a lot of people can agree that they prefer the art style of maybe Origins or just overall something more realistic looking. So would I have preferred something more realistic? Yes, absolutely yes. However, I cannot sit here and act like the art style isn't absolutely stunning for what it is, and actually looks so good sometimes that I forget it's not a pre-rendered cutscene because of all the bloom and all the atmospheric effects that they put in. The moment that you get done creating your character and finally start the game, you are met with a cutscene seeing your character that you just created in full action, fully voice acted, and it just hits differently because of how well animated it is, I think. And after all the time that I've already put in a Dragon Age Veilguard, I can say that it is definitely growing on me, but the game just looks so good I tend to forget what my preferences were before playing versus how I feel now. The Kunari are something that I just had to touch on real quick because I think that this might be my biggest gripe in the entire game. And the changes to the Kunari race are a prime example of when you break that fine line of creative liberties versus just being borderline disrespectful to your own lore. Once again, the aesthetic and what fans loved versus what you decide that they should love and be okay with. Now, I've seen some created characters from players that made a Kunari that actually looked pretty good, but for the most part, it just looks silly, like a Pixar character with horns, especially whenever it comes to the Kunari NPCs. I just had to get that out of the way because it just doesn't look good at all. I don't understand how they thought that that would be okay. Anyway, small rant over, let's continue. Now, one of the things that BioWare has usually done really well over the years is the companions. This game still nails that, with a few characters that I have complaints with, which is one of the major complaints of the overall tone of this Dragon Age entry. While most characters are very endearing, interesting, and have a lot of heart, there are other characters that just seem so out of place with their ditzy, silly attitude and modern-day way of speaking and delivery. Now, I am speaking specifically about one character in particular that I don't want to point out specifically because I want you to go in with your own experience with just a few impressions from myself. I'm not here to ruin anything for you, I'm only here to give you my honest thoughts, and I think the one forgiving element that I keep reminding myself about this tonal shift and is how it's not necessarily a bunch of silly characters doing silly things, but it's actually some pretty well-grounded characters put into silly situations with comedic reactions and responses. But sometimes it just doesn't hit very well, and again, I'm specifically talking about moments that are practically non-existent in the grand scheme of the dialogue in the game. Aside from the dialogue not hitting, I would say about 90% of the time it hits really well and respects the world. And speaking of the world, the delivery of the lore in the game is so well delivered that it makes it very digestible, so you can really understand, exactly what is happening, even if you haven't played the prior Dragon Ages leading up to Veilguard and the events that took place. But this is the first time in so long where I really felt that the parts of Thetis that we have always heard about and sometimes visited via DLC or what have you, that this is the fully realized version of that. Especially one of the first starting areas that you go to is a huge point of interest in terms of lore and the major events in world building for Dragon Age. I can honestly say that I'm spending way too much time in photo mode thanks to this, and these are some of the moments in the game where, again, I start to sort of forget about my complaints with the art style, and it really starts to sink in because I think it's very easy, and understandable to have complaints about the character model, art style specifically. However, the actual inanimate objects like trees and backdrops, the water, the giant stone monuments, the elven ruins towering above you and so on, it just looks amazing. The combat is probably the biggest standout for me on a surface level. The combat just feels really, really great. And it's strange to compare it to, but the thing that I'm going back to that it really reminds me of is sort of like a mix between the Batman Arkham games and The Witcher 3. You have animation canceling, dodge rolls, very smooth and slick animations, perfect parries and counters, special abilities, huge explosions, companion primer and detonators, and I could go on. And the combat is something that I feel like the Dragon Age series has really struggled with for a long time due to the fact that a lot of people, including myself, really loved the combat in Dragon Age Origins, and a lot of people really wanted it, to stay that way, stick to the old school formula. And as the days go on, I feel like they had to make a choice whether to, alienate the modern audience who, isn't quite in line with the type of turn-based combat that they offered, and giving it modern, action combat, sort of how we saw them struggle with Dragon Age Inquisition, in my opinion. I think that they absolutely nailed it with the combat in this game, and the tactical stuff is still there, and I think it's just delivered in a much different way. And this is one of those cases where you can, watch a video, see the combat, think that you understand it, but until you really get your hands on it, it really doesn't start to speak to you. In the heat of battle, slowing down time to aim at an enemy, to ask your archer to pin down an enemy, and then you look over at another enemy, ask your mage to freeze them, and then you unpause and just watch everything explode. It's really, really satisfying. And I think that they have mixed the idea of the Mass Effect companion combat and the tactical side with the medieval fantasy style and melee combat really well. They nailed it. They did a good job. Come on. Okay, so the big question that everyone is gonna ask me is that stuff. Yeah, that stuff. You know what I'm talking about, okay? You know what I'm talking about. Is it throughout the entire game? Is it sprinkled here and there? From my time with it so far, I can honestly say it is practically non-existent. There is one specific quest that a lot of people have been leaning on, may have given the impression that the entire game was like this, and for that one specific quest, I think it is horribly written, and that character should be a well-written character first and foremost, whether the orientation be something that is part of their background and not their foreground. I can make a whole video talking about this kind of stuff, and I sort of did before, but what I would say is that Dragon Age has been subtly like this for a long time, since Dragon Age 2, but it's had great characters that have turned out to be, let's just say, have different preferences. For example, with Dorian. Dorian in Dragon Age Inquisition was an amazingly written character, and he had family struggles, he had a great sense of humor, and his orientation was not at the forefront. It was only very subtly referenced, as it should be, because why would I care about that if he was a great character first? The story in the game is very respectful to the things that came before, with legacy characters, the tie-ins with relationships from past games, and so on. And one of the things that they show you right off the bat is how dialogue and choice and consequence within relationships are so well done. For example, in the early stages of the game, you have a choice to let one of the other characters go into a dangerous situation, and when they come out of that, they are physically scarred and injured. Now, this doesn't just go away quickly. This character and the choices that you made that affected that character are referenced for hours and hours throughout the game, and it really lets it sink in that these types of choices can impact your overall experience in your journey, as a whole. And it had affected them differently than I would have initially thought. So this really makes you realize that a lot of the times, well, most of the times, all of your dialogue choices are actually having an impact and change the way that people view you. And I never thought that I would be saying this, but I truly hope that they bring over this element into the next Mass Effect game. And I'm talking about situations where you will say something to a character, not thinking that it has any major impact, and then later on your companion will quote you almost verbatim what you said to them, and you realize, oh wait, did I say that? And it's just so well done, and I can't look past it, and I really do hope that, like I said, they move forward with this in other entries like Mass Effect. And so if you made it this far into the video, I just want you to remember that I really just wanted to give my thoughts on the game. I don't want to crap on it. I don't want to make you feel bad for liking it. I don't want you to feel dumb for not liking it. I just want you to like what you like and want you to be happy, because these are video games, people, and video games are about fun. And it's kind of hard to avoid whenever you're on the internet and having people yell at you all the time in the comment section about what you like and about what they don't like. But hey, that's just how it goes. So let me know down in the comments about what you think about Dragon Age Veilguard, and I know you will. If you made it this far, don't forget, consider leaving a like at the least and a sub at the most, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.